This is the Retirement Solution Podcast with financial advisor John Hicks, founder of J. Hagan Capital.
John, you have been doing some traveling. You have been getting out the house a little bit. Good for you. More so than just to the obscure towns in the nearby area with your daughter's soccer teams.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
So flags are up, pal. Next time you're traveling through the airport, make sure you're carrying your own charger with you for your phone. Because if you need a charge, be wary of the charging stations that have now been very popularized amongst airports. This is what CBS evening news anchor Norah O'Donnell was recently reporting.
A new warning from the FBI: don't use those free charging stations in airports, hotels, or shopping centers. Criminals have figured out ways to use public USB ports to infect devices with malware and monitoring software. The agency is advising the public to bring their own cables and charging bricks.
I mean,
isn't that crazy?
You know what's interesting to me is I hear about criminals that do tricky stuff like this, and I'm like, you are obviously a smart individual. Like, go get a real job. You probably would be very successful.
Well, the amazing thing to me is when you look at like the biggest mastermind con artists and those people that, you know, dupe billionaires and things like that, the intelligence level that they have is usually off the charts. They're just maniacal, right? They're just doing it for their own betterment and not to create anything good or just to do a good job. But there is, for them, until they get caught, sadly, there's more money in it for them to do it that way. And that's the sad truth, right? Whether it comes to knock off Louis Vuitton purses or take your pick. I know that, you know, there's all kinds of websites that have been popularized where you can get the knockoff golf clubs that are made at the same facility as Titleist or Ping or take your pick. And they just take that exact information and they just sell it on the black market. And someone is making billions of dollars on that stuff. But that was interesting because I have had a few people say and tell me, hey, John, don't use those charging stations there.
So that's something you've heard before?
Oh, several times, but I didn't know it was that prevalent. I just thought that it could zap your battery and da-da-da-da-da-da.
No.
I didn't know that they can steal your stuff.
They are scamming. They are scanning and scamming off of your phone.
Isn't that crazy?
Yep.
So both my backpack and my travel suitcase, my carry-on, they both have charging batteries within them.
Nice.
Now,
Those
some
are cool.
airlines, they say they do not want you to carry those on them. But as long as I charge up my travel bag and my backpack, then I can at least get off of the red bars.
Right.
If I'm stuck in Philly or Charlotte like I was this past week for an extra 5 hours.
Right.
So that was helpful. But it's crazy.
It's crazy.
What is the world coming to?
Listen, and the criminals, they are tricky and slicky. They are figuring it out. And I think, blame the internet because that's where you go to learn all this stuff. It's incredible what you can find on the internet. All right. But that's illegal criminal justification situations. Let's talk about other areas that people would consider criminal, but is very legal, in fact. Just talking about the taxes that is what we as Americans pay. Very legal, though criminal it may feel.
That is criminal. It is criminal.
I'm still recovering. I'm still recovering from April 15th, John. I don't want to talk about it. Let's not get into the personal ins and outs of it all. Just saying. Be nice to me. All right, but let's talk about what we can do. Speaking legally, understanding what our options and opportunities are, because that's the real key when it comes to our tax planning, especially in retirement. Yes?
Sure, absolutely.
So Roths, everybody's talking about Roths. Roth IRA, it's ideal for tax planning because you take the tax hit on the contribution now, but then your gains, they grow tax-free. This is what a lot of people are touting. However, the government might say, no, sir or ma'am, you make too much money. You earn too much in order to put into a Roth.
Yeah.
Is that always the case? Like, what's going on with that?
It's pretty much always been the case that if you make too much money, they wouldn't allow you to contribute to a Roth IRA. So there's all kinds of people that come see us all the time and say, hey, John, I'd never put money in a Roth. And I'm like, that's fine. A lot of people couldn't, but why didn't you? They say, well, we couldn't. That's not necessarily true. So guys, there are two ways. I don't care if you make $1 bazillion a year. There are two ways you can still get money into a Roth IRA. The first one is to convert. You can convert money from your traditional IRA into a Roth. Okay. Now, what happens when you do that? Well, you get a tax break for putting that money into your traditional IRA. When you convert it to a Roth, you just have to finally pay the taxes on making that conversion.
Is there an age limit on that? Do you have to be 59 and a half to do that?
You actually don't. You can do this at any age. You're just going to be liable for the taxes at that point in time. Okay.
Yep.
So if you're 54, it may make sense to do that. That doesn't mean that you should, but that's one of those things. But a lot of people say, well, John, I see what you're saying, but you're still going to pay the tax bill though, right? Yeah. And so the backdoor Roth may not be the best way for you to do that. So Heather, for a lot of people that have just done really well saving, and you did a remarkable job, establishing that pain threshold that I have about April 15th, or this year, I guess it was the 18th. So, maybe you're like me out there and you had to write a 6-figure check to the IRS. Now, I'll promise you one thing. There is nothing about that day that not only do I not detest, I'm thinking to myself, where can I move to not ever have to do that again? And guys, this is how it works. So if you're out there and you are reeling from the same pain I have, and guys, we use the majority of every good quality tax strategy you can use. But if you do okay, it doesn't matter. They're coming after you. Maybe you're a small business owner. Maybe you're at the top of your game as a lawyer or as a small business owner or as a physician or whatever. Guys, if you are writing 6-figure checks to the government, let me ask you one simple question. Do you want to keep doing that? Because one of the things that finally this past year that my CPA and I were talking about, and we're finally in the processes of ensuring it's the right thing for us to do, is a private letter ruling from the IRS. And what that states is that, hey, this isn't speculation that this will work. A private letter ruling from the IRS suggests that, hey, this has been tested. This has gone through a U.S. tax court, or someone has signed off and say this is a viable strategy. So the example that comes to my mind, Heather, is I was talking to a small business owner, and he was in a really great situation. He built this business up, and he was looking at finally doing an exit strategy. He was going to sell his business for about $28 million. He was the only owner.
Wow.
That's a pretty good chunk of change, right? And no, seriously. And so we were talking about that. He goes, John, but the problem is I'm going to have a huge tax bill. And we were going through that tax bill, and it was remarkable how much money he was going to give away. And so we were talking with his CPA. We were talking with my tax attorney. And what we realized is that my tax attorney, Jeff, found an unbelievable private letter ruling that we just had not explored, because that's a pretty good chunk of change, guys. Not everyone is going to have that situation. But what we found is there are a couple different trust structures you can use to not only defer the tax now for those sales, but potentially remove taxation during your entire lifetime from that sale. So for this gentleman, where we were looking at this situation, and I am absolutely going to employ a very similar rule, assuming it's still around, but we are potentially able to save this gentleman nearly $6.1 million in taxes by using the strategy. Wow. Now, why is this important? Because, Heather, the truth is that there are very few people that have those problems, so they haven't done the exploration. They haven't gone through the tax code. They don't know how to do these things. What we found, though, you don't have to have $28 million to use it. You can have $6 million. You can have $2.8 million. Okay. The point is, and you don't have to use real estate. You don't have to use any particular asset class. Because you've heard me say on this radio show before, if you are a real estate investor, I love it. Real estate creates unbelievable numbers of millionaires every single year in this country. But there comes a point where you're tired of repairing tenants' toilets and you don't want to go out there and potentially have to do something with lead-based paint, or you just get sick and tired of having to deal with the headaches and you want to exit that strategy. For years and years and years, we thought, well, you either had to just roll it into more real estate or you had to pay the tax bill. But there are two different trust options that completely avoid all of those downturns. And the money's fully liquid. You can invest it into anything you want. And here's the big one. It potentially can pass on for not 1 or 2 or 3 generations. Right now, the way the tax code is written and the way that the legislature is done, this could pass on in perpetuity and avoid paying those major tax bills. So this is a big deal. So if you're out there and you do not like writing those big checks to the government, I want you to think, should you pursue a different option? Should you at least do the research to find out what you can do to keep those 6, or in this example, 7 figures in your name, in your bank accounts, where you can earn interest and money on that money to do what? Potentially pay for the tax bill later on. Guys, that is the better way to do it. But you can't do better unless you know better.
And who is this speaking to exactly, John? The person that would be seeking something like this out? Maybe somebody who's getting ready to retire or in retirement, done with the real estate, like you were saying. Somebody who's going to sell a small business, a piece of real estate for like over 7-figure situation.
Well, it doesn't even have to be seven figures. Anyone that has a largely appreciated asset.
Okay.
And they don't want to pay the whole tax bill on selling that.
But they are looking to sell it to
live
their
off
retirement.
of the income. That's right, to live off of the income.
Okay.
And so in that regard, we now can control the sale of that asset. We can control when we choose to be taxed, and we can control how much money we earn in a different asset class during that period of time. And so in this regard, Heather, it may actually be as good or better than some Roths if we make too much money.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Solution Podcast with John Hicks. Begin the conversation about your savings plan with John and the team at J. Hagan Capital by visiting retirementsolutionradio.com. Be sure to listen to John's radio show, The Retirement Solution, Saturdays at 8 a.m. and Sundays at 9 a.m. on News Radio 840 WHAS.
J. Hagan Capital Inc. is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if J. Hagan Capital Inc. is licensed in your state, please call 502-690-5635. J. Hagan Capital Inc. is not affiliated with nor endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency. It does not provide legal or tax advice. Annuity guarantees rely solely on the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance and annuity products offered through Jonathan Hicks, insurance license number 548962.